Isaiah 11:12 says, "He shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." When the outcasts of Israel are assembled, and the dispersed of Judah have gathered, we will bring you that story. In the meantime, or until then, the Lamb Network will gather news from these same four corners and bring them to you, all with Messianic perspective and all with Messianic believers. Shalom and welcome to the Lamb Network's Four Corners Weekly News. I'm Rabbi Darrell Weinberg. Thank you for joining us. This episode will cover events that took place around this planet through April 4th, 2019. Here are those stories. It seems as though we have a lot of Israeli news and the US news. I guess the good countries of the world are dominating these days, well, at least for now. Let's start with some of the US news. Oh boy. Jussie Smollett is back on John's radar. It seems that the Illinois Prosecutors Bar Association is slamming prosecutor Kim Foxx for Jussie Smollett's decision. Go get him, John.
Well, thanks, Darrell. Here in the national news, we have Illinois Prosecutors Bar Association slams Kim Foxx for Jussie Smollett decision. Yes, Jussie Smollett, I'm bringing back up in the news again because of the outcome from the decision last week. And I wanted to bring some more things up because this thing's got some shelf life on it, and it certainly affects a lot of different things. I've got some commentaries here at the end of this article, so I'd like for you to stick around and listen to it. And basically here it says the Illinois Prosecutors Bar Association, the IPBA, has condemned Cook County State Attorney Kim Foxx for her handling of the Jussie Smollett case, calling her dismissal of the charges and public statements unethical and misleading. So what's going on here? Well, we remember last week they dropped the charges against Jussie Smollett, and since then he's gone on and proclaimed his innocence. Well, here the Illinois Prosecutors Bar Association is saying that the events of the past few days regarding Fox's handling of the Jussie Smollett case is not condoned by the IPBA, nor is it representative of the honest, ethical work prosecutors provide to the citizens of the state of Illinois on a daily basis. And the manner in which this case was dismissed was abnormal and unfamiliar to those who practice law in criminal courthouses across the state. Prosecutors, defense attorneys, and judges alike do not recognize the arrangement Mr. Smollett received. Even more problematic, it says the state's attorney and her representatives have fundamentally misled the public on the law and circumstances surrounding this dismissal. So, yes, is one innocent until proven guilty? That's true. But justice also needs to be handled correctly. And so, going on, there's a lot of different things in this Breitbart article that relates to this whole element. And one of the things that's irregular concerning Foxx is that she was elected in 2016 after a super PAC supporting her campaign received $408,000 in contributions from billionaire left-wing mega donor George Soros, who has funded progressive candidates for public prosecutorial offices ever since the eruption of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2014. So are we looking at stacking the deck and those things that aren't quite politically expedient for certain political points of view, that they have to have their own people in office in order to maybe shortcome justice? So here's some things that in regards to this that I've been thinking about. It's interesting to those who say that one is innocent until proven guilty, which I agree, yet the circumstances around this case beg to ask the question, why is the city of Chicago requiring Jussie Smollett repay the investigation costs of $130,000? And why is the Illinois Prosecutors Bar slamming Cook County's Attorney General's decision to drop the charges? And why did Kim Foxx drop the case? What influence did the George Soros Foundation's $408,000 in donations to her 2016 campaign? Or was it because she recently attended a fundraiser hosted by George Soros' son 3 weeks prior to Jussie being let off the hook? Are there any connections here? These things beg answers to these questions. Going on, what influence did Michelle Obama's chief of staff have in influencing the decision to drop the case? Seems like she got sent over as an errand girl to say, hey, you know, we like this guy. We need to make sure this thing that's gone bad doesn't go any worse. After all, what would happen in discovery? What would happen when the questions started being asked and the truth about who is behind this whole fake hate crime hoax is answered? So going on here, it says, why is there such an uproar from the Chicago Police Union over the decision, including Mayor Rahm Emanuel? I mean, after all, they were all, him and the union, very upset about the decision. And why were the court records sealed when the public and citizens of Illinois have the right through the Freedom of Information Act to review the documentation? After all, as Jussie maintains his innocence, what racially motivated white guys would hang out at 2 o'clock in the morning to jump a black guy in the middle of a sub-zero polar vortex? Doesn't make sense to me. And this case has a shelf life, as I said earlier, speaks to the heart of an ongoing issue to promote racial division and hatred between people groups, and is insanely insidious. Yeah, that's my words. Sinister, and it's an insanely insidious, sinister, and dark narrative that continues to be promoted. Not by Donald Trump, Mr. Rahm Emanuel, by the way. He's not the one that has caused the toxic racial issues in the United States of America. It's from the toxic leadership of the leftist communist haters and their media lackeys. There's more to this story, and it's going to be continued. That's what I have to say about that for right now.
We all know hate crimes are on the upswing in the United States. We also feel the pressure here in Canada. But when it happens at your doorstep, it becomes a reality. The owner of the Messianic Land Network, Mark David Smith, has a lot of family in Norman, Oklahoma, where it seems that one of the latest incidents of hate crimes is accelerating, and the local community is rising up to do something about it. For more on this story, our very own Mark David Smith. Mark.
For Messianic News, U.S. News, Messianics rising up against hate crimes at our doorstep. The headlines at news9.com for Oklahoma City News reads, hundreds rally against racism in Norman following hate crimes. My family spent 11 years in Norman, Oklahoma, as we served with others at B'nai Shalom Messianic Synagogue. Monty Judah is still the leading teaching rabbi there. Monty's son Ephraim now leads the teaching ministry along with others at Home Family Fellowship, also based there in Norman. I've known Ephraim Judah since he was a young boy. Our family watched Ephraim grow into a highly respected, valued resident of the Norman community. We did not see or hear a lot of hate crimes in that area while we lived there, but it doesn't mean it wasn't there. Though my wife and I have pulled up our deep anchors there and now live in North Carolina, part of our family still resides in the area, along with many of our congregational family. So we are troubled to hear that hate crimes are on the upswing, as this can hit close to home when family on many realms still call Norman home. But we are thrilled to hear that at the same time, the same family is rising up against this obvious threat. to anyone bearing a label such as Messianic or Jewish, especially if you are Messianic Jewish. This is from the News 9 website. Tuesday night, 3 Norman locations were targeted with racist hate speech: McKinley Elementary School, Firehouse Art Center, and the Cleveland County Democratic headquarters. This is the second graffiti attack in less than a week. The first was the Oklahoma City Democratic headquarters just 6 days ago. In a matter of hours, hundreds of people gathered at one of those crime scenes to take a stand. On Wednesday, April 3rd, Ephraim Judah assembled with many others within the Norman, Oklahoma community to speak against these graffiti attacks. Here is the video of the rally from the news9.com website. You will hear Ephraim Judah speaking in the first part of this video.
And have a hope for the future, a hope for this community to become better so that each and every one of our children can grow up in a community of peace.
I think it's really important that we come out here as a community after events like this to show that disgusting, abhorrent hate crimes like this aren't accepted.
Racist slurs painted on brick, windows, and glass. One statue at the Firehouse Art Center is still covered in graffiti and will have to be repaired. But it didn't take long to wash away most of the hate speech. And the search for the suspect could take some time. Many in Norman want to know who's responsible.
It's time for us to come together and say no more.
Police scoured for evidence near McKinley Elementary School, the Democratic headquarters, and the Firehouse Art Center. Within the past few hours, police released these images of the suspect and her car.
To the people who did this, I don't know what's wrong with you. I don't know why you hate me so much, but I hope that it stops. I hope that you figure out what's wrong with you that creates so much hate in your heart.
Joshua Harris Till helped clean up the vandalism in OKC 6 days ago. Norman PD believed the same suspect who spray painted similar slurs on 2 Oklahoma City buildings caused today's damage. OCPD posted this video moments ago on Facebook. The images appear to be similar.
To have this happen here and so close is a real wake-up call that this type of thing is really just increasingly common.
Hate crime is all around us. I hope it doesn't show up at my door or yours. But if it does, I know we will all rise up and show our communities we are not going to take it. Mark David Smith.
And now, a story in Right to Life News. The headline reads, "Stunning, pro-choice students find out they're actually pro-life." In just a few minutes of questioning. Here's John Craig with the amazing story.
All right. Thanks, Daryl. Here over in the Pro-Life News, this article is from naturalnews.com, and I have to give my applause to Natural News for putting out this article. It says, "Stunning, pro-choice students find out they're actually pro-life in just a few minutes of questioning." You got to listen to this. There are several reasons why a woman would want to choose an abortion, but a new film titled 7 Reasons might just change your mind about every single one of these pro-abortion arguments. In the film, several students were interviewed one-on-one. Every student that identified as pro-choice ultimately softened and changed their mind by the end of the interview. In just a few minutes of questioning, the students disassociated with their pro-choice beliefs and sincerely said they would vote pro-life in the future. With New York legalizing infanticide up until birth, this topic has become very important to discuss. And this is a 42-minute film, and it's put out by Living Waters Ministry. And you can get it over there at their website and watch it for free. It says in the film, students' pro-choice beliefs dissolved when they recognized and understood what the moral implications were of making this life or death choice. The film gets straight to the heart of the matter, bringing conscience and scientific evidence to the forefront of a very polarized argument. Well, Ray Comfort, the founder of Living Waters Ministry, approaches students and asks if they're pro-choice, and they say they are. But within a few minutes, their hearts begin to change. By the end of the interview, the students feel they could never support abortion again. So here's what this part of what it talks about. It says one pro-choice argument that quickly fell away in the interviews is the idea that there isn't a baby in the womb, just a clump of cells. When the students learned about the details of prenatal development, their hearts began to soften. Even at fertilization, all genetic information such as hair and eye color has been determined to ultimately bring a unique human being into the world. As soon as week 2, the baby, that says the fetus here, attaches to the wall of the uterus and contains the entire DNA to grow full term. By week 3, the placenta is developed to provide nourishment for the developing fetus. By week 4, gestation, a heartbeat has formed. Humans are, by the way, humans are pronounced deceased when their heartbeat stops. At week 6, tiny hands and feet have developed, and the internal organs are already developing. By week 7, by the 9th week, the baby's facial features are determined, and the mouth begins to open. After just 2.5 months, the fetus is approximately 3 inches long, and fine details such as hair and fingernails can be seen. So going on, I'm just going on and reading more of this article because it's just so good. So just bear with me here. It says the interview also helps students admit that their previous pro-choice beliefs were based on the idea that the mother's happiness in life is most important, and they can just kill human beings out of convenience. For the same reasons, a man may seek happiness from raping a woman, or a pedophile who is gratified by touching a child. A woman should recognize that her happiness is not paramount, not justified, and not fulfilled when she decides to end her pregnancy and shutter the developing life inside her. I mean, I'm talking about how people try to justify what happiness is. So just as evil as it is for a man to have those reasons, it is the same for a woman. Going on, it says the pursuit of a woman should recognize that her happiness is not paramount, not justified, and not fulfilled when she decides to end her pregnancy and shutter the developing life inside her. The pursuit of righteousness is far more important than encouraging a woman to pursue her own sense of happiness. Yet Planned Parenthood gives women reasons to seek self-destructive forms of happiness. Dulling the conscience to seek selfish desires will only damage the woman spiritually and emotionally, especially in times as the decision lingers in the back of her mind. Men are also affected by these decisions long term, so they cannot be silenced and pushed away just because they don't have the honor of carrying their offspring inside their bodies. Men whose conscience is strongly in support of protecting human life should have a voice too. Ray Comfort said that when he talks with young people about this decision, he is amazed at both the hardness of heart of some, but of the ignorance of others and tenderness of others. They have no idea what happens with an abortion, he said. I asked the question, like, if it was your job to kill a baby, what do you think would be the most efficient way to do the job? The question put the real issue in perspective and ultimately changes students' hearts on the matter. Well, all I can say is bravo, Ray Comfort, by attacking this, going out, doing your on-the-street interviews to sway the hearts of young people in America. When you combine everything together, what's going on, it really is a change that's taking place within our nation. Good to know.
All right, thanks, John. Okay, it looks like it's time for some Israeli news now. And the O'Hares are up to date on the latest engagement of rockets hitting Israel. Here are our favorite Bostonians, James and AviGayle O'Hare.
Thank you, Daryl. Welcome to this week's Israel Update. My name is James O'Hare.
And I am AviGayle O'Hare.
Sound
the alarm. How do you do that?
Blow the shofar, sound the alarm. Turn your hearts toward God's holy hill.
Yes.
That is what's important today. We got to turn our hearts to God's holy hill. Yerushalayim, Mount Zion. What's happening today, you get flare-ups from Gaza. We are taking this story from the Jerusalem Post, and it says in the headline, rocket launched at Israel as tensions flare up again. And if you've been in the news at all this week and the past weeks, you've seen what Hamas, the terrorists, are doing. They're taking rockets and shooting them into Israel proper, into the southern towns, and even as far as Tel Aviv.
Yes, it's not a time to retreat. And Israel knows this. It's not a time to retreat. Because of all this groundbreaking news that's been happening in Israel with the United States Embassy and now with the sovereignty of the Golan, and it's just stirring up the pot big time. So this is something that took place. Benjamin Netanyahu was on his way over to the United States of America to thank President Trump, to thank the United States of America for being a friend of Israel and to support Israel and to do these major breakthroughs that are such an encouragement to that land, that little strip of land. Check it out sometimes. Look at the map and see how all the enemies are surrounding Israel. So here he's on his way over to celebrate, and this breaks out. These rockets flare up. 7 people are injured. And James, you saw a picture of a car that had the results of the shrapnel that had gone through the car, like bullets going through it. And so it is time to blow the shofar. It's not a time to retreat. It's a time for all of us to wake up and realize that there is a battle raging. It's raging here in the United States of America. It's raging in Israel. It's raging in all the uttermost parts of the world.
You got to understand that Hamas is ruled by Iran. It takes its orders from Iran. It gets its munitions from Iran. Now, these, what they call Katyusha rockets, are not powerful in the sense of what a rocket, you think of a rocket, a cruise missile, something like that. But what they do is they load them with anything that they can, nails and glass and shrapnel, BBs, marbles, anything. So when the impact of the rocket hits the ground, it explodes, though it may not do a whole lot of damage within a diameter of the rocket, because it's not that powerful. But all these things fly, and they kill, maim, injure many people. This past week, it was 7 people that were injured in the Israel townships. And you could see the damage of what's going on.
Yes, and the outstanding part of this whole scenario, and we've been there, we've seen the area where they are launching these missiles, these rockets. That area was given to them by Israel. There were people that were living in that area. They were growing vegetables, and they had families. I think they had raised like 3 generations of families there. They had grandparents, as well as their children and then their grandchildren living there.
That's right.
And they were really they were booted out of there by Israel so that they would give room for the Palestinians to have a place. And they were hoping it was going to be a place where they could build homes, raise their families, and now for years they have been using it as a place to launch rockets, to destroy lives. And, a lot of times these rockets, again, as James says, they sometimes just can bring terror. It's just a terrorizing souls. These little families that are living in the area which abuts the Gaza, if you will, they have these shelters, and sometimes they'll be in their showers when these rockets go off and the alarm goes off, and then they have to run as fast as they can out of their homes into these shelters and stay there until all is clear. How would you like to live in that kind of a situation, where your families are hoping to go to school or they're going to work, and then these alarms go off, and then these families are terrorized by what is taking place there.
Absolutely.
And so this is something that you don't hear on the news.
Absolutely. Well, we just thank you so much for watching the Israel Update with your host James and AviGayle O'Hare from the Lamb Network Four Corners Weekly News. Back to you, Daryl.
Thank you, James and AviGayle. Okay, well, this is interesting. A sheriff is willing to go to jail over a red flag gun law. He says it's a matter of doing what's right. Well, isn't that a refreshing situation amongst law enforcement? For some more in U.S. news, here's John Craig.
All right, thank you, Daryl. National news again. Sheriff willing to go to jail over red flag gun law. It's a matter of doing what's right. This is taken from zerohedge.com in an article by Tyler Durden. And this is talking about a Colorado sheriff has stated that he opposes a proposed gun law so much that he's willing to go to jail rather than enforce it. Well, if you haven't been paying attention, there's multiple states that have been passing the red flag gun laws. And the Weld County Sheriff, Steve Reams, told CNN that it's a matter of doing what's right. A little bit of a background going on. The law that Reams says he'll not enforce is a red flag gun confiscation law based on House Bill 19-1177, also known as the Red Flag Bill or the Extreme Risk Protection Orders Bill, passed the Colorado Senate 18-17 on Thursday and is scheduled Monday for the House floor. With Democratic majorities in both chambers, state Republicans have too few votes to stop the bill. Last month, it says here, we reported that legislatures and sheriffs in the state have been pushing back against the bill, officially called Extreme Risk Protection Orders. Red flag laws permit police, healthcare providers, or family members to petition a state court in order to order the temporary removal of firearms from a person who may present a danger to others or themselves. Weld County recently joined the growing list of counties in Colorado that have passed Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions in response to the impending red flag law. So going on here, according to Commissioner Barbara Kirksmeyer, the severity of this bill cannot be overstated. The name of this bill is the Extreme Risk Protection Orders. I think that's a facade. I think it's fraudulent. I think actually this bill should have been titled the Extreme Order to Confiscate Your Firearms, Eliminate Due Process, and Violate Your Constitutional Rights Bill. And the Sheriff Steve Reams agrees. He says it raises some serious concerns about due process in that a person can have their guns taken away and their rights violated, all without ever having a chance to appear in an initial court hearing and cross-examine accusers and witnesses in person. So sheriffs could find themselves locked inside their own jails for refusing to enforce gun control laws. That's a concern that they have. It says the gun ban lobbies are getting more and more extreme and aggressive, according to David Koppel, a constitutional law expert. I was talking to CNN about that. It says the bill orders or allows a judge in order to order a person's gun to be seized before the person has a chance to appear in court. The bill does require a second hearing with the gun order present to be held within 14 days, where the owner could make a case to keep the weapons. But if the owner is unsuccessful, a judge could order guns seized for as long as a year. Koppel said it would be difficult to prevent a nightmare scenario in which someone misuses the law to take guns away from a person they intend to target violently. The burden of proof is low. Preponderance of the evidence, which is the same standard used in civil cases, and a much lower bar than the criminal standard, beyond a reasonable doubt. So keep in mind, remember O.J. Simpson? Yeah, they could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he murdered, but he lost his civil case because of the preponderance of the evidence was enough to swing the pendulum that he was involved in the murder of his wife. So going on, it says going in and taking their guns and leaving the scene, I can't see how that makes them less of a risk, according to Reams. It just takes one tool away. He's arguing that a person bent on hurting someone could do it with a knife or a car. Makes a great point. Last October, Maryland's red flag law went into effect. Less than a month later, the law claimed its first victim, Gary J. Willis, was killed by police when they showed up at his house at 5 a.m. to serve him with a court order requiring that he surrender his guns. So also remember that back in February, a group of sheriffs from New Mexico did the same. 33 sheriffs in the state. Of the 33, 29 have voiced disapproval of the package of anti-gun legislations by issuing a declaration through the State Sheriff's Association stating that the rush to act or react to the violence by proposing control on guns is ill-conceived and is truly a distraction to the real problem, proliferating violence in our counties and our states. So this is something we're going to continue to keep an eye on. Like I said, there's been a bunch of states that have already passed these red flag gun laws, and we need to be aware of what they're doing, and we need to be actively involved in getting these things reversed, as we see that once these laws are passed, what's going to stop the abuse? And that is always the concern that we have in regards to violation of our Second Amendment rights.
Thank you, John. The vision and mission of the Basora Institute is to help increase understanding among the members of the body of Messiah. We'll be right back after this message.
We did a survey at the end of the class, and the students were just so excited about the class. They said, we never knew all this stuff, and they just made the Bible come alive. There was just knowing from a Judeo-Christian perspective, why did Jesus say this, and why did the Pharisees, why were they acting like this? And they said it just really opened their minds, and they were so excited about the class.
And we had one guy, and when he came into the class, he was a little cynical, like, why do I even need to know this? But his wife wanted to come, and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But it was just funny because he, halfway through the class, he goes, you know, I was in a men's Bible study, and I'm sitting here looking at this scripture we're supposed to read, and all I could think of was, wonder what this means in Hebrew. Wonder what was meant by this. What is the bigger application to this?
Now it's time to take a look at some medical news. From the Lamb Network's own media coordinator, Susan Hooge from up in Vancouver. Susan is asking the question, who are the anti-vaxxers? This should be very interesting, as there's been a lot of press about this in the Canadian news. Susan?
In medical news this week, the National Post newspaper published a telling article in Canada to purposely provide a generalized profile of those who do not follow the current vaccine protocols for their children or themselves. It appears authorities are attempting to identify those who are being dubbed as anti-vaxxers. Yet it seems that a report of this nature is also polarized in its findings. The prompting of this article stems from what health authorities in a number of provinces are calling a contained outbreak of measles. However, when the health authorities were pressed about the source or ground zero of the outbreak, very little information was given, except to say that all the cases resulted from individuals traveling to Canada from other countries, such as Vietnam, where measles are not eradicated. On the flip side, health authorities have been very vocal about the effect of the cases that have been popping up recently, making sure to provide the news medias with daily updates and announcements of new cases. This kind of news coverage has prompted the public to rally for a call for mandatory vaccination and has increased the condemnation of anti-vaxxers. So, according to the National Post article, who are these anti-vaxxers? Tim Caulfield, the chair of the Canadian Research in Health Law and Policy at the University of Alberta, was interviewed and gave his assessment. As he stated in his interview with the National Post, there are two groups of anti-vaxxers. There are those who are full-on disbelievers in vaccinations and won't be swayed by any scientific information. They make up about 2 to 5% of the Canadian population. The other group is those who are more vaccine hesitant. They make up between 20 to 30% of the Canadian population. In many cases, these are people who have some of the vaccinations, but not all of them. Caulfield said, "It's not all about these vaccination myths and the anti-vax ideology. There is also practical considerations we need to factor in." Caulfield breaks these practical considerations down into three parts. There may be a lack of confidence in the vaccine and the people administering it. There may be a lack of compliance due to misinformation. There may be a lack of convenience, such as time, cost, and availability. Yet this article goes on to say that the vaccine hesitant group is a threat to the overall health of Canadians because of the large number of people in this group. Health authorities are working towards an outcome they call herd immunity, which is to protect the majority of the population through vaccination. In their eyes, they have a ways to go. In a 2017 poll within G20 nations, the US ranked 14th and Canada ranked 16th in compliance of immunization of 1-year-olds. China ranked as number 1. These lower immunization rankings within the Western nations could be due to freer access to information, whether good or bad, and more importantly, the fundamental laws of the land that allows for citizens to freely make their own choices. One of the most fascinating points about who are the anti-vaxxers and the vaccine hesitant individuals is that they come from all backgrounds of education and income. A poll done in 2015 revealed that nearly 40% of anti-vaxxers who participated had post-secondary degrees and/or earned over $100,000. Clearly, these polls indicate that something else besides anti-vaccine ideology is at play. A study out of Australia looked at the moral roots of anti-vaxxer attitudes, which revealed three sides to the vaccine debate. They were the vaccine acceptors, the fence sitters, and the rejectors. The study summarized that rejectors and fence sitters exhibited a heightened moral preference for liberty, that is, belief in the rights of the individual, and a low tolerance for authority. They also had a higher moral preference for purity, described as an abhorrence for impurity of body or mind and unnatural acts. In the end, this study discovered that rejectors and fence sitters were firm in their belief parents have a right to decide whether to vaccinate their children. Clearly, it's coming down to liberty and freedom. Nevertheless, as Moses admonished us so many times in the book of Deuteronomy, if you obey the commands, the statutes, the laws, and the ordinances of Yahweh that apply to you, then it will be well with you, and you will go well and live well. You know, there's no mention of what to do about vaccines in Moses's admonishings. So whatever each person decides to do, consider doing it in that positive, be well, and live well atmosphere of what Moses admonishes of us.
Thank you, Susan. Summer is creeping up on some of us, although others of us still have snow outside. And already for others, are you getting ready to prepare your lawns for summer? Well, here's John Craig with a warning. Take that, Roundup. Costco has confirmed to have pulled all Roundup glyphosate, which is a toxic herbicide, from its shelves from our favorite evil company, Monsanto. For health news, here's our very own John Craig. John?
Daryl, yes, in our health news, here's the article. Take that, Roundup. Costco confirmed to have pulled all Roundup, or glyphosate, which is a toxic herbicide, from its shelves. This is also taken from naturalnews.com. They keep hitting it out of the ballpark this week, and it says that it can often feel like our protests about matters like glyphosate in food are falling on deaf ears, but one retailer is poised to take a harsh stance against the dangerous chemical, and we can only hope other businesses will follow its lead. Costco, the fifth largest retailer in the U.S., will reportedly stop selling the popular glyphosate-based weed killer Roundup as the product finds itself at the center of a number of lawsuits filed by people who say it caused their cancer. And according to the founder of Moms Across America, Zen Honeycutt, says that 3 people within the company confirmed to her that they would not be ordering Roundup nor any other glyphosate herbicides in the spring shipments. This is a big deal, considering what happened recently, that a 46-year-old school groundskeeper and the father of 3, Dwayne Johnson, successfully sued Monsanto for causing his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after the glyphosate products he had to use at work did not bear a cancer warning label. He was awarded $289 million, although it was later lowered to $78 million on appeal. Monsanto is currently facing thousands of similar lawsuits. The product has already been banned in several countries because of the health dangers, but strong government ties, including a cozy relationship with the EPA, have enabled it to continue to be sold in places like the U.S. Costco setting a good example for other retailers overall. And it says that Costco's move came in response to a change.org petition created by Honeycutt that attracted more than 150,000 signatures. The group also asked home improvement retailers Lowe's and Home Depot to follow Costco's lead, saying that Roundup's carcinogenicity and lack of labeling means that it should not be sold to the public. And that petition currently has around 90,000 signatures. So if you want to go sign that petition as well, go over to change.org. Roundup is the country's second best-selling herbicide for home garden and lawn use, marketed by Scott's Miracle-Gro. Scott's distributes roughly $154 million worth of Roundup every year to retailers like Walmart, Home Depot, and Amazon. And even if they all stopped selling it, it would still be used on many conventional crops. Costco refusing to sell a product that could kill its customers is certainly a step in the right direction. Well, I have to say that's true. And that's why the work at independent news outlets is so valuable in helping people to make informed decisions about everything from lawn care to medicine. Well, I certainly agree with that. If you want to know more about the issues of glyphosate, how it actually affects our health, there's more to this and some links in this article here at naturalnews.com. Issues are concerning how many of our gut issues, intestinal issues, other health issues are related to Roundup, that which they spray on the wheat when they're getting ready to harvest it in order to dry it up and harvest it and put it right into our bread and other flour containing products. It's very important that we understand what's going on and why our body may be breaking down on us, why we've got leaky gut syndrome and maybe some other issues related to glyphosate, other chemicals and herbicides, insecticides they are putting on our food products. Maybe we need to be more aware and why these things are happening so we don't run to the pharmaceuticals, which Monsanto is owned by Bayer, where they are happy to sell the pharmaceuticals, the drugs, in order to help you get well after eating their glyphosate-covered products. By the way, it doesn't come off with washing. Can't get it out. Once it's in there, it's in there. And that is affecting our health, and that's why other nations around the world are banning its product. Very important to know. Well, that's it for the health news.
Thanks, John. Just goes to show you that you can never let down your guard on what you're putting into your body or putting in the environment around you. Let's jump over to world news. I know our own Mark David Smith is what they call a credit card cab driver. I think he's not happy about one of these credit card cab companies. I know Lyft went public last week, but I don't know how that affects Mark. Mark, tell us what's going on here.
In world news, at CNBC.com, in an article last Tuesday, April 2nd, it reads, treacherous, crazy, bad idea, experts sour on Lyft's IPO as stock fails. Lyft stock just hit the brakes in a major way. The ride-hailing company enjoyed a bombastic initial public offering on Friday with its stock soaring over 20% above its target price range. Shares reversed later in Friday's session but settled roughly 9% higher. I worked for Lyft for 8 months. I retired from a corporate operations job 5 years ago and hoped I would never have to go through that kind of stress again. I still drive for Uber. I wanted to drive for Uber and Lyft because of the no stress factor. I don't work or drive, rather, until I turn the app on, and I finish my work or drive when I turn the app off. I love being in control. I love driving and meeting people. Every once in a while, I actually get to talk about my belief system, but still rarely. Remember, the Lord draws who he wants when he wants. But the stress factor is usually in the lowest percentage when driving a cab, at least in my opinion, unless you drive for Lyft. Here's why. The way Uber and Lyft work is the driver turns their app on. A person who wants a ride puts their location and destination in their app. The closest driver accepts the call, and the driver is on their way to pick up the rider. Many times, the driver is taking the rider to their destination, and another rider will also need a ride. This is where Uber and Lyft differ in their apps. Uber will display a notice on your phone app that another rider needs a ride and you're the closest driver. You then have the option of accepting or declining this ride. Lyft will display a notice, all right, a notice that another rider has been added to my queue. It does not give me the option of accepting or declining, just that it has been added to my queue. There have been times when taking a rider to their destination that Lyft will add not one, but as many as 4 rides while still taking my first ride to their destination. There is no accepting or declining these rides, only adding them to my queue. So far, every time this has happened, at least 2 of these add-ons cancel before I finish the second drive. Then Lyft sends me a text basically yelling at me for not picking these rides up, and they canceled. Then when I get home, there are emails from Lyft saying this, and this is exactly what they write. Hi, Mark. Your driver account has been flagged for poor passenger experiences. Please review the following. Not driving toward your passenger. Lately, too many passenger cancellations have occurred because you don't make progress to the pickup location. Remember to start driving to the pickup location once you accept a ride. These violate the Lyft terms of service and put your driver account at risk. We appreciate your commitment to our community and are here to support you. But if we continue to receive reports like this, it could lead to account suspension and permanent deactivation of your Lyft driver account. Then another email arrives in my inbox almost immediately after the one I just read, and this is what it says. Your driver rating for this week is 9 5-star ratings. No 4-star ratings, no 3-star ratings, no 2-star ratings, no 1-star ratings, only 9 individual 5-star ratings. I only had 9 rides for that week, and every one of those were the highest ratings you could get, 5-star ratings. This means that every ride I gave for that week was the highest rating they give, a 5-star rating. I'll let you decide. Wait, I saved them the trouble. I have removed the app from my phone. I have unsubscribed from their emails. I quit. Now Uber, 100% no yelling notices on my Uber app. When I decide to decline a ride, no yelling emails or lying emails when I decline a ride, no adding a ride to my queue when I'm already giving a ride. Let's see. Oh yeah, no stress. Lyft went public last week and immediately their shares plummeted. And by the way, did you know that they lost $1 billion last year? Not because of me. Mark David Smith.
Thanks, Mark. It seems like many companies are doing things that are not in the best interest of even those who work for them. And now, Jamie Louie never lets us down and always has a story for us. We just can't wait to hear for another story in our weekly Israel update. Jamie says that since they built the wall there, 99.99% of suicide attacks and other attacks have stopped. Wonder why the Democrats are so opposed to having one at the southern border of the U.S. The people have guns and can protect their families. And now we want to hear from Jamie Louie.
Well, good evening, everybody. This is Jamie Louie from Clarksville, Virginia. They call me the Virginian. I am my brother's keeper. In August of last year, my brother was diagnosed with bulbar ALS, which is a terminal disease. So I moved to Virginia from Kansas, where I was a chef, to see if I could help him. Got him taking some right stuff through he has a tube, the feeding tube. They'd given him up for hospice, the people at the different centers and the doctors he was working with. So anyway, we, bottom line, started giving him some good stuff. Got a hold of Jordan Rubin, got some good stuff with coconut milk and bone broth, and protein powder, garden, all that stuff. Got him using that. And then I was watching YouTube, a patriot, retired Marine, shouts out, Steve Motley. And he's talking about this CBD oil. He said I was changing and helping him so much. So I got a hold of some, started taking it for my brother and myself. And within a week, he took a test for swallow, and he was able to pass it, to the surprise of his speech therapist and neurologist. Well, in the news today in Israel, there was some article about some of that. But one of the first articles I wanted to mention was this. There was a terrorist stopped. Now, I've been going to Israel since 1998, 29 times since then. And early on, when I went there was a lot of suicide bombings. Actually, one happened in Saperos, right down the street. There was a shoe shop. Michael Rood was there, and he was behind a post, and actually people got hurt in the streets. Head of one of the people blew at his feet. It's a long story. Make it short, we've seen a lot. And also other places where buses were blown up. But until Israel did one thing, these suicide bombings and this terrorist attack kept happening. And that one thing was build a wall. They finally built the wall, and they eliminated 90.99 of all those problems. Well, they still have terrorists, and this is one, and the way that they combat that terrorism is with resilient people. And here's an example. This terrorist stopped. A terrorist with a knife attempted to stab an Israeli man who was sitting in his car with his daughter at a junction on Route 60 near a village of Hooge, which is also close to Nablus in Samaria. The driver, Yehoshua Sherman, exited his car and fired at the terrorist. A nearby Israeli truck driver fired at the terrorist. The terrorist was killed. Well, that's exactly what happens when you arm your citizens and you let them protect their families. Terrorists get killed. Well, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about protection, protecting your people. Well, in 1937, they outlawed cannabis in the United States. Hemp in the United States couldn't be grown, well, anywhere. So now, and it's changed because they passed the Farm Bill in 2014, and our president, on December 21st, 2018, signed it into effect. And that's changing everything, and the hemp revolution has started. Hemp does wonders for the body. The endocannabinoid system is something that actually operates and prepares the rest of your systems to operate at full function. And without that operating at full function, you're not going to get well. It's going to be a lot more difficult. So the hemp oil is going to help our country, our people, in so many different ways. Well, in Israel, they started growing it. The farmers, 500 farmers, started growing it. Cannabis is used for medical purposes. Around 40,000 patients use medical marijuana. So it's a potential market of 165,000. And right now, the government's let them use it to treat cancer, Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, terminal illnesses. I tell you what, this stuff helps everything. Helps you cure anything that's going on with your body. I burnt my hand. I scalded it with water, put the oil on it, and it didn't even blister. I go to sleep and sleep so much better. Sound, solid sleep. All my systems seem to be working. My brother is well enough for me to leave him for 4 days and go to Kansas and to a meeting. So all kinds of things are changing. Well, thank you, Daryl, for having me on tonight. Thank you for this opportunity to bring you some news.
And now for our last story in the U.S. news. Apparently, President Trump has declared that the U.S. census is meaningless without the citizenship question. Go figure. Here's John Craig.
All right. Well, continuing with the national news, this is an article by Reuters over at Reuters.com. It says Trump declares U.S. census meaningless without citizen question. And the article goes on and talks about how U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday injected himself into one of the most consequential cases of the current Supreme Court term, saying that the nation's 2020 census would be meaningless without adding a citizenship question to the questionnaire. And talking about this in his tweet, Trump said, "Can you believe the radical left Democrats want to do to our new and very important census report without the all-important citizenship question? Report would be meaningless and a waste of billions," ridiculous, "that it would cost to put together." And So going on about this, there's a lawsuit. Actually, several lawsuits have been placed because of this question in the liberal courts, and talking about the citizenship question. Now, Ross, who is putting it together from the Labor Department, said that the addition of a citizenship question in March 2018, he said it was in response to a Department of Justice request for data to help enforce voting rights, which protects eligible voters from discrimination. Only U.S. citizens can vote in federal elections. Non-citizens comprise about 7% of the 328.7 million people living in the United States. Census questionnaires have not included citizenship questions since 1950. We're looking at the data. The reason why that is true is because it's been during times of peak immigration time periods that they put the question in there. Going on, it talks about a long pedigree. Furman's decision, or Furman is actually a judge who is part of this lawsuit brought by 18 U.S. states, 15 cities, and a variety of civil rights groups, and urging the Supreme Court to overturn Furman's ruling. Solicitor General Noel Francisco, representing the Justice Department, said Ross had discretion to add the citizenship question, and that there was a long pedigree in the census for asking about citizenship or county of birth. He also said other democracies, including Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Indonesia, Ireland, Mexico, Spain, and the United Kingdom, ask about citizenship on their censuses. Another federal judge, Richard Seaborg, in San Francisco on March 6, also declared the citizenship question illegal. So, of course, following the ruling, the Supreme Court said it will also decide whether Ross's decision violated the Constitution's enumeration clause, which sets out terms for counting people. So the current question and the argument for leaving that off the census is that it might undercount 4.2 million Hispanics alone. And so here is another point of view from Howard Hooge in an article written as an inconvenient census truth. And he bluntly says it, first sentence in his article, he says, Democratic districts have fewer U.S. citizens in them. He goes on to say, I'm not suggesting that non-citizens are undeserving of a voice or of government services, simply that we ought to be aware of how these numbers skew the manner in which congressional districts are drawn. To discourage non-citizens from responding, thus suppressing the census count in immigrant-heavy Democratic districts and reducing their representation. But Democrats should nonetheless be embarrassed to be pursuing such a line of reasoning. They're defending a system that disproportionately leads to their representing residents who have not voted for those who are nominally representing them. Keep in mind that congressional districts must all include similar population totals, but the Constitution requires a resident count of all free people, including those who are not citizens. And population is the basis of House representation. I mean, that's a point of view from Howard Hooge. What I'm saying that needs to be very, very careful is that it is the House of Representatives who represents citizens within their districts. And like what this article said, it's not necessarily taking away the voice of non-citizens, but the point of the fact, it's the U.S. government representing U.S. citizens. And by watering down the population pool with non-U.S. citizens in the representation in Congress, takes the vote away from those who are U.S. citizens. It's very important that we actually look at this truth and why this question is very, very important to be on the census, especially with the flood of immigration that's coming in our southern border. At this point in time, the United States is set for an increase of some 6 million. This is from the Border Patrol, saying about 6 million immigrants, illegal aliens, will be flooding our borders this year. And one of the reports that I listened to recently said that in the next 10 years, if this is not stopped, that's leading and upwards to 600 million illegal aliens flooding our nation. Well, if there's 347 million in our nation right now, what would 600 million illegal aliens do to the United States of America? It would collapse it. We would simply not have a nation anymore. And without a border and without controls there and without knowing who real citizens are, then we no longer have a nation. So just some thoughts on that. Very good, President Trump. It's very important that we pray for the Supreme Court and we voice our opinion and let them know why this must be protected even in the census coming up.
Fortunately, common sense isn't so commonly practiced. Thanks, John. As always, we want to end off our reports with an encouraging word. So Susan is here to tell us that the largest salt cave in the world just happens to be in the Holy Land. Here's Susan Hooge.
This week in Israel News, I bring you a report that is not of the usual political or religious nature, but instead is about something deep and dark that will help us to actually get to know the land known as Israel a little bit more. Yet, the world could potentially make this into a political and religious briny mess anyways. Researchers from the Israel Cave Research Center, part of Hebrew University of Jerusalem, made an astonishing announcement on March 28th. They have finally completed the mapping of an Israeli salt cave originally discovered back in the 1980s. This cave, called the Malham Cave, is found in the Dead Sea area at Mount Sodom. The mapping has finally determined that the Malham Cave is the longest salt cave in the world. Even though the cave was discovered in the 1980s, the technology at that time could not accurately map this cave to determine its actual size. And for this reason, it remained as an undocumented site for over 30 years. That is, until this year, when 80 research cavers from 9 different countries, in cooperation with Hebrew University, began an official mapping expedition this March. Using pinpoint lasers coordinated with special programs on their phones, the cavers were able to survey a very accurate description of the cave. After assessing their accumulated data, it was discovered that this cave is the longest salt cave in the world, measuring 9 kilometers in length, which is roughly about 6 miles. This completely outshines Iran's Namek Dan Cave, which has been known previously as the world's longest salt cave, measuring in at 6 kilometers or roughly 4 miles. According to the National Post article published on March 28th, Associated Press writer Ilan Ben-Zion had this to say: "The Dead Sea and Mount Sodom were formed by tectonic plates, and the shifting of the Earth's plates at the northern end of the 6,000-kilometer Afro-Arabian Rift Valley. Over millions of years, successive flooding of the Deep Depression laid down thick layers of salt. The salt layers were squeezed out from the subsurface, where they were deposited a few kilometers underground. And while being squeezed out, they form a mountain, which is rising still today at a rate of about 1 centimeter per year," said Amos Frumkin, who is the Hebrew University geologist who has been studying the cave for decades. The Malham Cave's main outlet yawns not far from a salt pillar named Lot's wife, after the biblical character who was petrified for looking back at the destruction of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. On the mountainside above, the survey cavers have identified at least 19 openings where seasonal floods have percolated through Mount Sodom's cave salt, rock salt to form the cave. Making the announcement at this time, just days prior to the April 9th Israeli federal election and the start of Passover, may be a calculated and strategic event. With the tensions escalating between Israel and Iran, along with Iran's proxies in the region, this latest announcement could be viewed by Iran as another Israeli jab against Iran's attempt to dominate the region. For Israel to announce that they have something bigger and better than Iran, especially if it's something that is classed as the longest in the world, could be viewed by Iranians as an insult and will probably add to Iran's anger towards Israel. Will this require a leader at the helm who can take on an even angrier Iran? Was this announcement encouraged by a particular Israeli political party to further their agenda and platform for the election? These may be questions that Israelis might have to grapple with in the days before the election. Whatever they must grapple with, the data is in, and it has been proved that this cave does exist as the longest in the world. As far as biblically minded people are concerned, this geological announcement acts as another proof that the land where Yahweh has placed his name and will eventually gather us from the four corners is a sign as to where he will place his people, who are known as the salt of the earth. I'm Susan Hooge for this week's Israel News Report for Lamb Network's Four Corners News.
Well, thank you for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Messianic Lamb Network YouTube channel for all information about shows, broadcasts, show hosts, producers, schedules, what's coming up, anything and everything you want to know about the Lamb Video Network. Go to the all-new website, same old location, all new look at messianiclambradio.com. Donate as you are able. Sign up for the bi-monthly email updates. I'm Rabbi Daryl Weinberg, and you've been watching the Four Corners Weekly News on the Lamb Video Network. Have a great and restful Shabbat Shalom.